Welcome back to The Full View. Rwandans in the diaspora are heading to the polls at various Rwandan embassies and consulates to vote in the national elections today, with polls in the domestic vote expected to open early tomorrow morning. Incumbent 66-year-old Paul Kagame will be facing off against lesser-known opponents, 47-year-old Frank Habineza and of the Democratic Green Party, and 57-year-old former journalist and independent candidate Philipe Mapayimna. This election takes place amid growing tensions between Rwanda and neighbouring DRC over rebel violence and resource wars. SABC's Channel Africa East African Affairs specialist Nixon Katembo joins me to give us the full view on it. Nixon, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. This is a pivotal election because it will determine if Rwandans at all care about what's happening in the DRC. Is this at all a conversation as they are heading to the polls?
Well, it could be a conversation, but not necessarily so, because these elections are already predetermined in a sense that the way they have been prepared by President Paul Kagame running the show all over. Even the opposition itself, a credible opponent, not being allowed to run into the election, the likes of Victoria Ingabire and the likes of Diana Rwigara, who just got dismissed outright from running these elections. So you have people like Frank Habineza and this other candidate just as a facade to show that at least there is some opponent running against the president. And one would expect that those results, as usual, they will be above 90%. That shows a certain level of to question the credibility of the election itself.
One would have expected Philipe, who is an independent candidate, former journalist, to at least do well. He has a history of helping civil society NGOs, particularly in Hutu refugee camps. Paul Kagame, who is a Tutsi leader, for instance, has a lot of ethnic support from there. Why is it that Philipe has not been able to garner the support of
You have to look at the controlled nature of society in Rwanda. Where people are afraid even to speak, people are afraid even to engage, because the institutional framework in a country is run by the military, be it at a foreign policy level, be it within the country. And even as a journalist, he should know, Philippe should know how many journalists have been killed for voicing out their concern in terms of the way the country is run. So it is not surprising that it's happening the way that it happened. And it will determine many of foreign policy issues. You mentioned the issue of the DRC, but you should not forget that Rwanda is close to us here in Mozambique in terms of quote-unquote aiding the terrorism in Cabo Delgado. But in real sense, Rwanda is entrenching its own foreign policy objectives there by, encroaching on what would have been traditionally a SADC position in Mozambique. For example, the country's crystal venture, which is the investment wings of the RPF, and its subsidiary Massfield, is heavily invested in various sectors in Mozambique. And that, for someone who understands the geopolitics and someone who understands the nature of foreign policy objective in terms of how a country entrenches itself in a particular region, in a particular sector, you should be worried why Rwanda is in Mozambique, particularly for a country like South Africa, where our soldiers are in the DRC fighting the M23, much of which the United Nations
and
group
Paul Kagame
has
denied any links and support of the M23 rebels.
There has just been published a report by the UN group of experts on 8th of July, just about 3 days ago, explicitly saying that Rwanda is a de facto command and control of the M23 rebellion, and they have sent over a division of Rwandan soldiers. Now, in military terms, a division is composed of between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers. So when you have 6,000 soldiers going in a foreign country, what are they doing there? And you have to look at how the way in which South African soldiers are being attacked in the DRC. That tells you how much Rwanda is determined to get SNDF out of the Sami DRC so that the mission can collapse. But in a sense also impacting on how it leveraged its power in Mozambique, and therefore sort of causing an embarrassment to SADC region and in particular this country.
South Africa already has a tense relationship with Rwanda. One wonders if this is at all a conversation that will happen between the bilateral representatives there. But just a last question on this. Paul Kagame is 66 years old. He has said that he's not going to be around forever and has called on his party, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, to identify his successor, possibly someone that will come out of the Rwandan Patriotic Forces. I'm assuming that is the traditional history of selecting leaders in the party. Who's up next?
Let me tell you one thing. The regime in Kigali is a prototype of what happened in Uganda, because remember Kagame was a security interior minister in Uganda. And much of the things that they have done in Rwanda goes in line with what have happened in Uganda. In 1996, during the general election in Uganda, President Museveni said that he's going to run his last term in 2001 when Kizza Besigye ran. Much of which you see Museveni is still there today. Kagame is saying this just to appease the international community or not. But I don't see Kagame going even after these elections, because if he goes, then he's likely to prepare his own kin. Could be the wife, or could be Ian Kagame, who just graduated from Sandhurst in the UK as a military commander. That says so. Don't expect a meaningful transition in that country. For us, who know the politics of the region, you can just look at it, because I can tell you that even now, journalists who are covering these elections in Rwanda are muzzled because they cannot speak freely. By the time they leave their countries, going to Rwanda, they already assigned military intelligence spies monitoring those journalists on what they are going to do. And that is the nature of a controlled society. More or less like North Korea, by the way.
I am going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for it. Really appreciate it. Of course, these polls are opening tomorrow, with the voters in the diaspora being able to vote today at their various embassies and consulates. We will keep an eye on that and bring you more up-to-date coverage and analysis of the election as it takes place and as the results start flowing.